You have pictured mathematicians 1,000 times, sitting at a desk, scribbling endlessly, grinding through equations line by line. That is just how math is done, right? A slow, painful construction of careful logic. Wrong. I want to show you something incredible. A man named Ramanujan did not build math. He dreamt it. He pulled perfect, impossible equations out of thin air while he slept, claiming a goddess placed them on his tongue. Understanding how a human brain actually does this will completely change how you see your own mind and, maybe, the universe itself. Think about how we are taught mathematics in the West. It is a very careful, very serious business. You start with a solid foundation, a few basic rules you agree on. Axioms, they call them. Then, you take a small, safe step. You prove one tiny thing. You take another step. You prove the next. It is exactly like a mason building a wall. You take a single brick of logic, you put some mathematical mortar on it, and you place it down carefully. You check it with your instruments to make sure it is perfectly straight. If it is, you are allowed to place the next brick. And the next. It takes years of slow, painful, grinding work to build anything beautiful or new. Every single mathematician in the world works this way. You always have to show your work. You have to prove exactly how you got there. But then, in the early 20th century, a thick envelope arrives in Cambridge, England. It is from an unknown clerk in India named Srinivasa Ramanujan. The brilliant British mathematicians open the pages, and they are completely baffled. Because on these papers, there are no bricks. There is no careful mortar. There are absolutely no step-by-step proofs showing how this man got from point A to point B. Instead, Ramanujan is just handing them entire, completed castles. Breathtaking, impossible mathematical structures. Complex infinite series and formulas that nobody had ever even imagined, just sitting there fully formed on the blank paper. When they finally asked him, "How did you do this? Where are the steps? Where is your logical foundation?" Ramanujan did not point to a blackboard. He did not point to years of academic deduction. He said something that offends the very nature of Western science. He said the formulas were simply placed on his tongue by his family goddess, Namagiri, while he was dreaming. He would wake up, and the magnificent castle was just there. Completely built. Now, to a scientist, this is deeply disturbing. Math does not just fall out of the sky. So, how did those numbers actually get inside his head? How does a goddess whisper mathematical truth into a sleeping mind? Let's take away the mythology for a second, but let us keep the magic. We tend to think of the brain, especially the subconscious, like a massive filing cabinet or a computer hard drive. You put information in, it sits there perfectly still, and later you pull it out. But that is not what is happening in the dark of your skull. Not at all. Your subconscious is not a quiet library. It is a storm. It is a boiling soup of billions of neurons, and they are constantly jiggling. They are wiggling, vibrating, and violently bumping into each other. Every number Ramanujan ever looked at, every pattern he ever noticed, every tiny fraction of a mathematical thought he had while he was awake, they did not just sit still when he closed his eyes. They were constantly in motion, bouncing around in the deep, quiet dark of his sleeping mind. Imagine trillions of little puzzle pieces of raw information, just shaking and colliding. Most of the time, they bump into each other and just bounce off. Nothing happens, just static. But sometimes, driven by pure chaotic energy and this endless jiggling, two pieces hit each other at the exact right angle. And they snap together, and then another piece wiggles its way in, and it snaps too. They lock into place. When Ramanujan was awake, his conscious mind was too loud. But in his sleep, the jiggling took over. The mathematical pieces kept colliding, kept snapping together, building themselves into massive, elegant structures without his active effort. To him, waking up and seeing this fully formed mathematical equation felt like a divine gift. It felt like the goddess Namagiri had literally placed it on his tongue. Because he did not feel the work being done. He did not feel the jiggling. He only saw the magnificent, completed result of trillions of quiet, subconscious collisions. But this brings up a massive question. So why sleep? Why didn't Ramanujan just figure all of this out while sitting there drinking a cup of tea? To understand this, you have to think about a piece of wood. A simple log sitting in your fireplace. The carbon atoms inside that wood desperately want to connect with the oxygen in the air around them. They are naturally attracted to each other. But the log does not just spontaneously burst into flames. Why? Because there is a barrier. An energy barrier. Those atoms need a spark, a little push to get them climbing over a barrier before they can finally snap together. Once they do get over that hill, it is a magnificent catastrophe. An explosion of heat and light. We call it fire. Your awake mind is exactly like that barrier. When your eyes are open, your conscious brain is incredibly strict. It demands logic. It constantly filters your thoughts, saying, "That is a crazy idea," or "Those two mathematical concepts do not belong together." Your awake mind builds a giant, invisible wall of rationality. It actively keeps all those wiggling, jiggling puzzle pieces of information safely apart. But what happens when you close your eyes and finally go to sleep? You let go. That strict, logical filter shuts down. The wall collapses, the energy barrier drops completely to zero. And suddenly, all those brilliantly weird puzzle pieces that were kept apart all day are free. They rush toward each other in the dark. They do not have to climb over a heavy barrier of conscious logic anymore. They just freely collide, and snap, and snap, and snap. It is a beautiful, positive catastrophe. An absolute explosion of neural connections and wild ideas that your awake mind would never, ever have allowed to happen. The true genius of Ramanujan was not just that he possessed the right mathematical puzzle pieces. It was that when he slept, his barrier fell so completely that it allowed the pure, unfiltered fire of discovery to burn wildly in his dreams. But does this mean anyone can do it? So, does this mean anyone can just go to sleep and dream up a mathematical masterpiece? Well, no. You have to feed your brain the right puzzle pieces first. But that sudden leap of intuition, that magical dropping of the energy barrier, that is something every great mind experiences. Richard Feynman, one of the most brilliant physicists of our time, understood this perfectly. He did not claim a goddess spoke to him in his sleep, but he knew exactly how to make that conscious wall collapse. He knew how to play. There was a time when Feynman was feeling completely burned out. Physics had become a heavy, serious chore. He was trying too hard to stack the bricks. Then, one day, he is just sitting in the cafeteria at Cornell University. A guy walks by and throws a plastic plate into the air. A simple, ordinary plate, just like the ones you use at a picnic. As it flies, it spins, and as it spins, it wobbles. Feynman just watches it. He is not trying to solve the secrets of the universe. He has zero academic pressure on his shoulders. The energy barrier is completely down. He just starts calculating the wobble of that plate for the pure fun of it. He is just playing, and right there, in that relaxed, open state, the pieces in his mind started to jiggle. They collided. They snapped together. The math of that silly, wobbling plate effortlessly connected to the deeper laws of electron movement. That moment of playful observation sparked the exact chain of equations that eventually won him the Nobel Prize in quantum electrodynamics. Geniuses are not superhumans with alien brains. They are simply people who have obsessed over a subject, filling their heads with a million fascinating little pieces, and then they let go. Whether they are dreaming in India like Ramanujan, or watching a plate spin while holding a cup of coffee like Feynman, they allow the barrier to fall. They let the pieces dance. But if these perfectly formed answers are just waiting there to snap together in the dark, where do the patterns themselves actually come from? To answer that, you have to look outside your own head. You have to look at a tree. If you ask someone where a giant oak tree gets its mass, where all that heavy, solid wood actually comes from, almost everyone will tell you it comes from the dirt. It pulls the earth up through its roots. But that is completely wrong. A tree is actually made out of thin air. It breathes in invisible carbon dioxide, and it uses the sheer kinetic power of sunlight to snap those carbon atoms together into solid wood. A piece of firewood is quite literally just captured air and stored sunshine. When you strike a match and throw a log on a fire, you are not just burning a plant. You are releasing sunlight that was trapped 20, 30, or 100 years ago. The heat you feel on your face is an echo of the sun. Your brain is doing the exact same thing with information. Every day of your life, you are walking around, absorbing the world. You watch a plastic plate wobble. You listen to the rhythm of a train. You see the silent geometry of a flower. You are constantly pulling in the invisible patterns of the cosmos, just like a tree pulling carbon from the air. You store all of that light, all of that data, deep in the dark of your mind. We like to think of human genius as something unnatural, something magically separate from the rest of the physical world. But we are built from the exact same star stuff as the trees, the fire, and the sun itself. When a genius like Ramanujan or Feynman finally lets down their conscious barrier, when those trillions of tiny puzzle pieces suddenly snap together into a perfect, impossible mathematical truth, it is not a miracle coming out of nowhere. It is a release. It is a sudden, explosive release of everything they have quietly absorbed. A moment of true human insight is just a campfire in the mind. It is the universe, having spent a lifetime storing its hidden patterns inside a tiny human skull, finally bursting back out into the light. So the next time you find yourself stuck on a heavy problem, pushing yourself to the point of frustration, trying to force the bricks of logic to fit together, maybe you should stop. Stop grinding, drop the barrier, go for a walk in the woods, watch a leaf fall, or just go to sleep. Trust that the billions of neurons in the dark of your skull are constantly jiggling, endlessly colliding, quietly doing the beautiful work for you. You are not a machine. You are a living piece of the universe that has finally woken up and started thinking about itself. Your mind is built to catch the light. But if human genius is simply the act of absorbing the deep, hidden patterns of the cosmos and waiting for them to snap together in our sleep, it brings up a much stranger question. Why are those perfect mathematical patterns hiding out there in the empty space to begin with? Why does the vast, quiet universe have a rhythm for us to hear at all? That is a completely different story. I will leave you something to imagine.